Yes, and I just wanted to remind you as well that there is another side stage, and we're going to have a last one talk at the moment. It's going to be Stargaze, MEV in NFT primary markets. So if some of you are interested in this subject, please join us on the side stage. Okay, and now I'm going to welcome on the stage Vish Modali from Quicksilver.
Hey guys, I'm Vish. I'm one of the co-founders of Quicksilver. I'm the chief product officer. I deal with things like business development, partnerships, and thinking about the feature set of liquid staking. So I guess the term liquid staking has been thrown around a fair bit throughout the course of this event. So I guess it's now time to address what liquid staking is and what the Quicksilver solution is. So I'll high level go over what liquid staking is, the problems that liquid staking solves, the problems that liquid staking creates, and what Quicksilver's take is on all of this. Yeah. So I guess to tell the story of liquid staking, it would be useful to first just high level go over what staking is. Now, most of you are familiar with this, but in most proof of stake blockchains, asset holders wishing to stake their tokens in order to earn a certain reward are required to lock their capital. This locked capital acts as a security deposit for the validator. So if the validator misbehaves, this security deposit is slashed, and that's supposed to be a disincentive for validators. Now, the concept of liquid staking is to issue a representative token on this staked position. So the representative token not only represents the staked positions, but also any rewards that the staked position accrues and any risk that comes with slashing. Now, there are many models of liquid staking that have gone around. The concept itself has been around for the last 2 years. There's Lido, there's P-Stake, Osmosis is working on their own version of it. So the concept in general has been around, but the core of it has been the same, that you have an asset which is representative, and that's liquid staking. So a good question to ask at this point would be why liquid staking and why liquid staking in the Cosmos ecosystem? And my answer to that on an economic level would be that there is this fundamental capital efficiency problem in the Cosmos ecosystem. And I think it takes two forms. The first is that in most Cosmos SDK chains, only 5% of staked assets are actually slashable, meaning that 95% of assets, though they contribute to economic security, are not actually slashable, so they can be used elsewhere. And it's this promise of being able to use elsewhere is what brings up liquid staking. And I think as of today, as of this morning, this value is somewhere near $40 billion. So it's some pretty big amount of capital that is sitting in staking. The second capital efficiency problem I see is that the Cosmos ecosystem has adopted this path of high staking APRs to bootstrap economic security. Now, high staking APRs are considered to be a good thing because they bring this security to chains. But high staking APRs obviously make DeFi uncompetitive. Now, if you look at this from the perspective of an application-specific DeFi chain, they first have to give out a high staking APR to get economic security on their chain, and they also have to dish out a lot of incentives to actually be, for their product to actually be competitive with traditional staking. And obviously, this is not sustainable it's not long run sustainable for a DeFi ecosystem. But the thing is, it was never supposed to be a long run thing. High staking APRs are and were supposed to be a temporary thing, and they are. High staking APRs will come down at some point. But the conventional wisdom or the conventional economic wisdom with regards to this was that when these high staking APRs came down and stabilized, a DeFi ecosystem would emerge out of this low staking APR environment. Now, that would have been true if IBC did not take off in the way it has taken off, where it's made the entire Cosmos ecosystem or the entire IBC ecosystem into one interoperable economy. So the risk here is that there's always going to be these powerhouse projects that come out with high staking APRs, and these staked assets, instead of being freed, continue to remain locked and keep migrating from chain to chain, chasing high staking APRs. And obviously, this would starve the DeFi ecosystem or any potential DeFi ecosystem of the collateral or the liquidity it needs to grow and flourish. So it's pretty clear that there is some level of competition between DeFi and staking. And we don't even need to think about capital efficiency to reach that conclusion. Even on a user level, there is this age-old question: do I stake? Do I provide liquidity? And sooner or later, it's going to be: do I do 10 other things, right? And the goal of liquid staking is to remove this inherent competition and make both of these verticals function together in a synergistic manner. So far, I've made the economic case of liquid staking, right? But I think Cosmos is also architecturally in the right place for mass adoption of liquid staking and really leading the charge in this field. And I think that comes down to two core technological innovations in Cosmos. The first is the liquidity staking module being built by Zaki and the Occlusions team. And what the liquidity staking module does is that it tokenizes a staked position to produce non-fungible delegation shares. These non-fungible delegation shares are then consumed by liquid staking protocols like Quicksilver to create fungible and fungible liquid tokens which can be used anywhere. Now, the cool thing about this is that it changes the user flow of staking completely. Traditionally, if stakers had to be onboarded into liquid staking, they had to unstake their assets, wait for the unbonding period, and then deposit their assets into a liquid staking protocol. Now, two things happen there. One, they lose out on their rewards for the unbonding period. And the second thing is that it also constitutes a security risk because a lot of users may unbond in order to enter the liquid staking protocols that would come up. So the liquidity staking module removes the stickiness from staking and makes the flow of assets much smoother. And I think this would be really big in driving liquid staking adoption in Cosmos. The second piece of tech that I think is quite critical is interchain accounts. And basically what interchain accounts lets Quicksilver do is a Quicksilver user can now control an account on another chain from the Quicksilver chain. So they can do all of the staking natively and just operate through the Quicksilver chain. And I think this is pretty important because the Cosmos ecosystem is expanding. A lot of new chains are coming out. So any liquid staking solution, a liquid staking solution cannot be built for every single chain. That would simply be not feasible. So we need a liquid staking solution which is largely chain agnostic, and interchain accounts enables us to do just that. Now, so far I've talked about capital efficiency, I've talked about how liquid staking can boost the DeFi ecosystem and all of that, but staking also has a pretty important function other than security, which is protocol governance. And if there's one thing I've learned from Cosmos Twitter over the last 3 months is that people care about protocol governance, and rightfully so. So under the current model of liquid staking, if there was a wide adoption of liquid staking or DeFi, there would be a governance problem in Cosmos because governance power would be inherited by the user's validator. In the best case, we'd have validators calling all of the shots, and in the worst case, a few validators would call all of the shots in multi-billion-dollar protocols. And obviously, this is a less than ideal situation. So now I've talked about what I see are some of the biggest problems that are associated with staking and liquid staking. Now I'll quickly go over the Quicksilver solution and reason about how we try abating some of these issues. I think the Quicksilver value proposition rests in these three verticals. It's capital efficiency, decentralization, and governance. Capital efficiency is a fairly straightforward one to answer. Quicksilver is, at the heart of it, a liquid staking protocol. It allows users to mint Q assets, which are liquid representative of staked positions. But the issue is not all staked positions are same. Each validator has a different risk profile. Each validator has a different commission rate. So how do we achieve fungibility? So our solution for fungibility is to socialize all risks and rewards. So all risks and rewards on per asset on the Quicksilver chain are socialized in a redemption rate. So there will be a redemption rate between the native asset and Q asset. And as staking rewards accrue, theoretically, the value of the Q asset will keep increasing. And this is how users can get their staking rewards. The second key piece of Quicksilver is decentralization. Now, we've made a very conscious design choice to use unrestricted validator sets. Now, traditionally, liquid staking protocols have used whitelisted validator sets, which is a select group of validators. Now, this made sense because these were trusted validators, you could onboard them easily, and the idea was as the protocol grows, the validator set would eventually expand. Now, the problem with this, especially in Cosmos, is that with something like the liquidity staking module, a lot of stake could be onboarded into a liquid staking protocol from day one. So it's quite important that we go with an unrestricted validator set, because the risk otherwise is that these few whitelist of validators might end up having a disproportionate amount of stake, again constituting a security risk. So the default position for Quicksilver is that Quicksilver will allow delegators to delegate to any validator that they could do so natively. And the second thing we do to promote decentralization are these things that we call performance, things we call participation rewards. And participation rewards directly incentivize users for delegating to smaller, which is decentralized, and performant validators. So what we sort of believe this will do is and if Quicksilver managed to capture some substantial amount of stake, would balance out some of the validator inequities that exist in the Cosmos ecosystem. I also think this is a viable solution to the early bird validator problem, which is validators get into a validator set of a new chain early on, capture a bunch of stake, and remain to dominate. So I think these participation rewards would act as an economic incentive to balance things out and promote decentralization. The third and pretty big thing that I'm personally very excited about is the maintenance of governance rights. I think governance rights are core to what makes Cosmos chains what they are. They're application-specific chains with sovereign communities around it, which come alive through protocol governance. And if liquid staking and or DeFi takes off in a big way, these governance rights will be lost for the users. And Quicksilver tries fixing this by having a governance by proxy module built on Quicksilver. So for every chain Quicksilver onboards, we mirror the governance proposal that happens on the native chain on the Quicksilver chain. And the Q asset holders would be able to signal their intent for the proposal. And this intent would then be reflected on the native chain. So this still gives users some semblance of participation and some say in governance of the Cosmos ecosystem. And I think what's cool with this, and this is a solution we're working on, is that especially with interchain queries, what we can also do is that if assets are held off-chain, we could still count them in governance. Now, just to give an example, if you have some atom, you bring it over to the Quicksilver chain, you bond it for some Q atom. Cool. And logically, you go put it in the liquidity pool or somewhere else. We're working on this solution which would essentially enable you to still participate in hub governance with your Q asset in an osmosis pool or in some other DeFi protocol. And I think that's pretty cool because you can't even do that with native assets right now. But obviously, this is slightly complicated to build out. Interchain queries is in a very early stage right now. And we will be publishing a full rundown of how we plan to do this pretty soon. So the way I see it, governance is a pretty prominent thing, pretty important thing for any liquid staking protocol. And I personally don't think Quicksilver can become a liquid staking hub without having strong solutions for governance and by extension being a governance hub for the Cosmos ecosystem. So I guess to quickly wrap up and conclude, unlocking all of this capital is just the first step for Quicksilver. The interesting thing would be to figure out what to do with all of these assets. If $40 billion worth of assets enter the Cosmos ecosystem, there are a lot of things you could do with it. Now, personally, I'm excited about building some sort of index on top of Quicksilver with all of these collateralized assets, but that's just one thing, and a lot of things could happen. And that's partially why we've allocated 20% of our Genesis supply to funding all of these cool projects that could be built with Q assets. Now, I guess to sort of conclude, the vision of Quicksilver is essentially to have all of these assets enter the Cosmos DeFi ecosystem and supercharge it in some ways. And while supercharging this DeFi ecosystem, we want strong communities centered around user-based protocol governance, a decentralized validator set, and a general WAGMI situation for everyone in the ecosystem. And I think that's about all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So you talked about this kind of like socialization of rewards for delegating your liquid stake with smaller validators. Do you mean that you would be redistributing what would be earned, like, so for example, Atom, or is that additional rewards in like Quicksilver tokens that go on top, which are then?
Yeah. So it's additional rewards in Quicksilver tokens that we give out to users who choose smaller and more performant validators.
Okay.
I think there's a question back there.
I just have a quick question. What would you say is the main difference between this and something like superfluid staking on Osmosis?
Yeah, so that's a pretty good question. Now, superfluid staking and liquid staking are essentially two approaches to solve a similar problem, and the problem being capital efficiency. And so what superfluid staking does, and the market that superfluid staking targets, are liquidity providers. So users who already provide liquidity on Osmosis can now use that capital and to stake and secure the chains and earn an extra yield on it. But the target that the market that liquid staking, a liquid staking solution like Quicksilver targets, are people who currently stake, or users who prefer to stake their assets first. And I guess another key difference of a liquid staking protocol would, as of now, would be that with a liquid token, it sort of gives users that freedom to explore different alternatives and do different things out of it. Now, you could do things like indexes, for example. Like you could have one asset collateralized by a bunch of Q assets, which are representative tokens, and then this collateralized asset could then be integrated in DeFi ecosystems. So these are sort of possibilities that open up with liquid staking. But obviously, superfluid staking has a much cleaner UX in some senses, where you don't need to deal with this representative token. So I think both are pretty good solutions and I think both will end up doing pretty well in the ecosystem.
Okay, thank you very much once again.
Thank you.